Widow of Myrmark, Ode to the Farmer and the Stork. Katrina Peterova was a widow of 14 years. At 18, she married for love with a vision of decades of shared life, fields of bounty, children laughing as they darted through sunlight, and evenings by the hearth filled with warmth and conversation. But fate was swift and cruel. Her husband died when she was only 22. She never remarried. Instead, she lingered on the outskirts of Myrmark, tending a modest farm in silence, her hands worn by labor and her heart quieted by loss. Her only contact with the world was her Saturday trips to the market and her Sunday attendance at Mass. She was a familiar face, yet distant. Her solitude marked her as someone apart, like a tree at the edge of the forest, visible, but separate from the life of the grove. On stormy autumn nights, the wind clawed through the trees, and rain pounded against the roof with a relentless fury. One such night, with thunder splitting the sky and lightning crawling across her fields like the fingers of a ghost, 4 strangers arrived at her door. Rain streamed from their cloaks, water dripping in dark rivulets onto the threshold. Their voices trembled as they told their tale. Attacked on the road, their wagon gone, their horses stolen, left with only the meager packs on their backs. They bowed their heads, shivering with fatigue, and asked for shelter. The one in front spoke up. "I understand if you must turn us away, but if you do, can you point us to the nearest shelter or town?" Pity stirred in her heart, though suspicion tugged at the back of her head. A middle-aged woman alone could not risk wolves, and men were often wolves in finer clothing. She would not let them inside her home. Yet, the rain lashing her windows and the fear etched into their faces pricked something soft in her chest. Instead, she gestured toward the barn. "Sleep there," she said, "and in the morning we'll talk again." The men thanked her profusely, promising to repay her kindness with labor. Their names, when asked, were given as Joran, Mikkel, Stefan, and Luca. The men thanked her profusely, promising to repay her kindness with labor. When pressed for their names, they offered only Joran, Mikkel, Stefan, and Luca. Their voices carried a faint edge of charm, but Katrina, accustomed to the subtleties of human nature, felt the quick flicker of something hidden behind their eyes. At dawn, true to their word, the strangers set to work. They split wood with rhythmic precision, carried water in heavy buckets, and mended fences that had sagged with age. Katrina watched them from her doorway, the rising sun catching droplets on their hair like scattered jewels. By mid-morning, she had prepared a generous breakfast, the smell of fresh bread and sizzling bacon filling the small farmhouse. Together, the 5 sat at her long wooden table, the surface scarred by years of labor, its corners worn smooth by generations of hands. The men ate heartily, though their eyes darted toward one another whenever Katrina pressed them with questions. Where were they from? Which parish? Which family name? Their answers were vague, their glances sharp, as if they were surveying her home and weighing each object, each corner of the room. Anxiety coiled in her stomach. Mikkel and Joran exchanged a glance, subtle but unmistakable, as their hands simultaneously moved to their hips. Katrina felt a sudden, cold suspicion, but she silenced it, reminding herself that her own heart was generous, that she had offered them shelter in good faith. She opened her mouth to dismiss them, and at that moment, the door crashed open. Guards in black and red stormed into her dining room, their boots splashing water onto the floorboards. "By order of the parish," one barked, "you are all under arrest for theft." The visitors' sacks were ripped open. Gold spilled across the floorboards, silver glimmered among the crumbs of bread, and jewels winked in the morning light like fallen stars. Katrina staggered back, horrified. Her mind raced, trying to understand, to grasp a thread of explanation. But the guard's eyes turned on her with equal suspicion. She sheltered them, one sneered. What widow opens her doors to 4 armed men on a storm-tossed night? She knew. She must have known. Another guard held up a necklace, crusted with damp earth. Stolen from the church at Fairhaven only 3 days past. She hid them, gave them time to cover their tracks. That's no accident. No, Katrina cried, her voice breaking. I gave them only a barn to keep the storm from killing them. I did not know. Her protests fell on deaf ears. The guards exchanged grim smiles as they bound her wrists with coarse rope, the fibers biting into her skin. She has no loyalty to Myrmark, said the guard, tightening the shackles on her wrists. She lives apart, never mingling with her neighbors save for market, and mass 14 years a widow, yet no friend, no kin. She carries silence like a cloak, perfect cover for thieves. And motive, another added coldly. Her husband gone, her house crumbling. Perhaps she needed coin to ease her loneliness, or to buy loyalty where none would come freely. Dragged through the streets, Katrina saw the faces of Myrmark staring back. Some whispered in pity, others averted their gaze. None dared speak in her defense. To them, guilt clung to the group like smoke. It did not matter that these were people she had grown up with, nor did it matter her hands were clean. She had sat at a table with thieves, and that was enough. The sun broke through the storm in shards, catching the windows of the homes she passed. The warm golden light mocked her, turning every witness into a silent judge. The trial was swift. Witnesses were unnecessary. The evidence of her company was enough. The verdict was inevitable. Joran, Mikkel, Stefan, Luca, and Katrina were condemned alike, their names scrawled in the same ink upon the judge's ledger. In the hours before dawn, Katrina lay in the cold cell, the walls damp and rough, her thoughts tangled like the ropes that would soon bind her. Her stomach twisted too painfully to eat her final meal. Instead, she remembered her husband's smile, the soft murmur of children they never had, the quiet peace of her farm, now taken from her. A tear slid down her cheek as she wondered if justice had ever been fair. She realized then that the world cared little for innocence, for intention. It cared only for appearances and the stories people told themselves to sleep at night. At least at the end of it all, She knew in death she would find herself in his arms once more. At dawn, the bells tolled. The 5 bodies swayed from the gallows in the chill wind, creaking as if they still protested their fate. The villagers watched in grim silence. No one distinguished thief from widow. In death, they were one, as indistinguishable as shadows merging in the mist. Katrina's eyes, even in their final moments, held a quiet defiance, a glimmer of truth the world could not see. She had acted with kindness, and that was her only crime. The wind carried her silent plea across the fields she had once tended, over the forest at the village's edge, and perhaps even beyond, into a world that might understand. Moral of the story: you are judged by the company you keep.